telling me to start. Okay. Okay, we will start. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to have all of you here today with us in our second session. This webinar comes within the framework of the annual program Innovate Now, Live Tomorrow, launched by the BA Information for Africa, BAIFA, and the Francophone Network Units, under the auspices of the library sector, the information institutions, and the professional skills department. Through this program, we aim to highlight the innovations and the innovative measures that have been taken in different sectors to deal with the economic and social impact of the pandemic. And today, it's my honor actually to be the moderator for this session. I'm Rania Osman, and I'm the director of the Information Institutions and the Professional Skills Department, Library Sector. And today, actually, I'm so honored to have a friend and a very well-known figure in the library community, Mr. Michael Dowling. And actually, thank you, Mr. Michael, for being with us today and for giving us the opportunity to ask you and to exchange our experiences. Michael Dowling has been the director of the International Relations Office and Chapter Relations Office of the American Library Association, ALA, since April 2002. He is currently serving a second two-year term on the governing board of IFLA, which will end after the Virtual World Library and Information Congress, which will take place this year in August 17th to 19th. He served 8 years on the IFLA Management of Library Association section, the last 2 years as chair. He is responsible for the professional development of the annual Sharjah International Library Conference, which will be held this year in November. Prior to his current duties, he was the Deputy Director of the Reference and User Services Association, which is a division of ALA for a short time. Before joining ALA, he was the Director of the Monroe Public Library in Wisconsin and the librarian at Temple University, Japan in Tokyo. He received his master's degree in Library and Information Science from the University of Maryland. Thank you, Michael, again, and we will be so happy to listen to your experience and to answer the questions by the end of your presentation. Michael will give a presentation, and we will have the questions after he finished. And you can send your questions via the chat, or you can raise hands, and we will give the time for few number of speakers of the attendees to speak and to have their questions. So we will start with Michael. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Rania. Thank you so much. And thank you for the Bibliotheca Alexandrina for inviting me to participate. Let me see if I can get my screen to share here. Just a second. Where is my entire screen? Share. See if that will work. Can you see my screen, Rania?
No.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Of course. Now, do you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, so let me switch it now. Do you see the presentation?
Okay. Yes.
Yes?
Okay, yes.
You see it. Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much again for the invitation. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where you are around the world. Again, great to have a chance to share some thoughts and some information on how the U.S. libraries have handled the pandemic, some of the innovations that have been done, and some things that will, I think, continue because their validity for libraries to continue on doing beyond the pandemic. So obviously, as we know, all of us are unfortunately in this pandemic, and it seems to be continuing on with the Delta variation spreading out in the U.S. and other countries as well. And as those who are reading the news are seeing that again, that the U.S., even though we have been fortunate to get a lot of vaccines, we are starting to see those cases rise again. And of course, that has meant that libraries have been challenged. But in addition to the pandemic, we've also had issues of political unrest in the US. We've had a lot of social unrest. We have a lot of fake news going on that has been challenging for vaccinations and other things. And obviously, we have the global issue of climate change that is hitting everywhere around the world, including the United States. So, the pandemic is like I said, has been a huge challenge for all of us. But again, as librarians, just like around the world, I think in the United States, overall, libraries have done a really good job of managing and following science and determining how to safely reopen as best as possible for their communities, how to provide services, how to adjust and adapt. But as we know, this is kind of our current status with people wearing masks, which is the best way to, with the vaccinations, also to help stopping the spread and helping to end the pandemic. So yeah, obviously when the pandemic started, which it's hard to believe that it's over a year and already a few months, so 15 months ago, the American Library Association worked very quickly to create resources for libraries. Obviously, there were huge challenges, as all of you are aware, as to how do you change on, in a moment's notice where you had to close. How did you start to provide services remotely to people? What were the policies about people, whether they were coming into the library? How did that work with staff? Everything. So ALA created a number of pandemic preparedness resources to help with getting the library community together to start sharing information, and that's what we do best, librarians, is that we share information to help everybody to manage. So after kind of the initial shock of everything, ALA started to, in the summer of last year, started to look at, okay, the pandemic we need to start moving into the recovery, and as the initial lockdowns were ending, how do libraries open, and how do they open safely? And so ALA did a number of surveys, but also we created a website that has the link here that still has some pretty good information on it that I would recommend if you haven't looked at it already. The main areas that were education, which I will talk about a little bit, data and research, which I will also mention, and a lot of areas of guidance and protocol in there. So again, all of these four main categories, if you go to the website, you'll see a lot of good information that I think is still useful for people. So obviously we are on a webinar right now, a global webinar. ALA and all of its various components put together quite a number of webinars dealing with all the different kind of initial issues that libraries were facing, as far as doing virtual services. Certainly for the universities, the question of how do you provide remote services that weren't violations of copyright? How did we work with vendors to get permission to expand opportunities? And just how to teach at a distance. Some libraries were already doing that a fair bit, but obviously how did libraries do that? How did they help their instructors? How did they help get to their students? So all those things that had to be kind of modified from what was happening pre-pandemic. So obviously one of the major issues is everybody was how the staff were responding to all the disruption, not just at your workplace, but also your home life. Certainly, as we know, many people have families, and how they were trying to manage both work and um, home life, and the challenges with schools and older parents, et cetera. So we did a number of programs to working on how to manage stress and anxiety. And I think obviously with the continuation of the pandemic, this is a major issue for all libraries. And how do we work with our staff? How do we work with the community to help everybody manage as best as possible their both mental and physical health? Yeah, some of you may already know about the Realm project, but the real concern, especially at the start, was, well, how long does the virus last on materials? If we're a library that mainly checks out books and CDs and DVDs and other materials, or people would be coming to the library and sitting at computers, how long could the virus potentially last on those surfaces? And what was needed was really good data on that. So thanks to our government agency, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and our OCLC partners, they did a project, and again, a very good study with a very reputable laboratory, and to figuring out how long the virus would last. Now, with the new Delta variant, I guess that's a new issue, so there may be some more upcoming research on that. These are the kind of the current data on how long the virus could potentially last. So most libraries are holding materials at least for a week before putting them back in. Obviously, they are cleaning surfaces, disinfecting everything as much as possible. But the need and the opportunity happened with the crisis, was to have the community get together more often, and obviously the opportunity through webinars and just through virtual activities. This is what really I think is going to continue on beyond. So ALA started monthly webinars, just like the one that the BA is having here, for people to get together and learn from each other. And so these are some of the topics that have been discussed at ALA through the months, updating people, and again, just like here, giving opportunities to ask questions and share resources. ALA's after in April, we always have a State of America's Libraries report. This year it was focused on the COVID and COVID responses. So again, if you haven't looked at that, I would encourage you again to look at that. It has some of the examples and other things that I'm going to be sharing here. The real concern when libraries closed their physical buildings was that we obviously were not closed. Libraries were still open, still operating. We had already had a pretty big online presence, but obviously that became the presence for libraries, whether they were public, academic, school, government, et cetera. And so how did we tell that story, or how did we make the public aware? How do we make our communities aware that even though the physical libraries were closed? So this is an example from our Illinois Library Association, one of our state associations, that their campaign was bigger than a building. So more or less telling the populations in Illinois that the library is more than that closed building that you see when you might drive by. It is open. There's your opportunities to have ebooks. There's opportunities to get to databases, etc. Libraries in the U.S. have responded in a number of ways to help with the crisis. Certainly now we are seeing more libraries become vaccine clinics. That didn't happen as much at the start of the pandemic, but we're seeing that more now, especially with the kind of this second, the Delta wave, and then that there are more people who have not yet been vaccinated. So trying to reach out to those populations that haven't been vaccinated. And librarians were pitching in wherever they could. A lot of them are government employees, so they were turned into COVID tracers, helping out with lots of other activities that the government agencies needed. So obviously the skill sets that libraries and librarians have was greatly appreciated. Dealing with fake news, has been a challenge. So, a lot of programming and information, how to take care of that, or try to manage it, or try to demystify and provide resources for libraries to that, because again, as we know, that's not just with the vaccine, but all other areas that through social media, that so much misinformation is out there, and how librarians can help, especially in the times of the pandemic. And so obviously lots of libraries have created very well researched and well sourced sites that both their students, faculty, et cetera, can use to get the good factual information about pandemic and other things going on. Regarding the racial injustice in the United States, obviously with the death of George Floyd, other deaths of other Black individuals, it was needed for libraries to also respond. And certainly with the pandemic, we've also seen where anti-Asian attacks have happened. So, anytime there's a crisis, people blame other people. And so we've had to work very diligently to provide resources. And this is something I think that ALA and the libraries were starting to move forward to, but obviously it's been, the pace has really picked up, and this is something that libraries in the US are going to continue to be very much involved in, social justice. Sustainability, obviously with the climate change, in US libraries, we hadn't been that engaged in the UN Sustainable Development Goals pre-pandemic, but ALA has, with our connections with IFLA, we have really taken that on as part of our efforts. Sustainability has now become one of ALA's key active initiative areas, and so we're pleased that we're helping to promote that through libraries and through programming in libraries. As many of you are doing, and a lot, the thing is, we are going through a significant historical time, and so libraries have been documenting the pandemic in lots of different ways in their communities, both schools, public and academics. We are making connections with major other organizations that have been creating tracking and other things. So this is the Atlantic magazine had created their own resource, but obviously for them to maintain and manage it was going to be difficult. So they turned to the University of California, San Francisco Library. So as far as if projects are going on in your country that you're concerned about the preservation of that as a historical record, you may want to reach out to them. And I'm sure, again, your ability as institutions that serve as long-term repositories could be a good partner for them. Regarding public libraries, again, they've had to pivot, lots of different new services. So I'll just mention a few here. As you can see, lots of different things that libraries have had to do. And one of the big things, we're obviously in the United States, we're mainly a car culture unless you're in a very urban environment. So obviously curbside pickup, providing resources from the physical library to patrons outside so they didn't have to come in, and again, doing that in a safe and secure manner. So pretty much every public library and even some school libraries and academic libraries did kind of these curbside pickups where people could order stuff online ahead of time and then come pick it up with support from the librarians. The pandemic really showcased in our country, and I'm sure in many other countries, the digital divide. And so there's been a real emphasis on helping to reduce that. And so many libraries are now have acquired Wi-Fi hotspots. We're getting support from governments to do that, lending computers, all the things that people need to kind of survive and participate in 21st century. Concerns about those people who are isolated, and I know everywhere in the world that's a problem, especially for the older people. So a lot of libraries started programs to connect with some of their older users to make sure that they were getting resources that they needed. Part of the social justice movement is that in the U.S., libraries, public libraries especially, would, if you had an overdue materials, they would charge a fine. More or less, that has been that we've had a tipping point where now more libraries don't charge fines because the concern is that people who don't have a lot of resources and a lot of money, it disenfranchises them because it's more for them to pay than, say, a wealthier person to pay for those fines. So that's a big change that will continue on. During the pandemic, obviously, if there's food insecurity, so libraries have been serving as resources for that in their communities. Again, libraries are a place where people know where to go. Ebook usage has been one area. Again, as we know, the pandemic obviously with ebooks had been started, but again, access to online resources was really important as everybody was locked down. So the libraries shifted their budgets a lot. Again, as we move forward, that may be shifting back a little bit. But certainly a lot of people who didn't use the libraries now, they were at home with nothing to do, and they got information that the library had ebooks, and so we got a lot of new customers, more or less, from the pandemic. And libraries that could have some budget or support through our public kind of government grants were creating new resources. So again, many more virtual resources for people. And as all of you know, that the main thing was, how do you create all those programs that you had in person? How do they go virtual? And so, not too many libraries probably had YouTube channels when the pandemic started, but now pretty much every library, small to large, has YouTube channels for their to provide videos on different programs and activities that they're doing. Obviously the story times all went virtual, and libraries just kind of really moved into learning how to create virtual programming, on different topics, and depending on what the community was. So as you can see, most of them still have very large, robust programs. And in some cases, they're getting more people participating in those virtual programs than in person, because obviously in person, you still have to take the time to drive to the library. If you're, a half hour away, it may be easier for you to just do it in person at your leisure and from your home. Libraries have used the time to train people on different software and programs that they have at the library. So in addition to general programming, they're actually helping to train people on how to use library services that are there. So this is just an example of, a kind of a laser cut machine that if someone wanted to use it, they would learn how to do that through a video. Then they could actually send the program to the library, and then that would be printed out. So a lot of the community had their own book clubs started, so libraries had to work with them to how to do ebooks for that. So here's examples, again, how libraries were providing more digital content, but also how a local book club could use the library to access books. Health, as I mentioned, is been a huge topic for everybody, and so libraries, especially public libraries, are doing a lot more with health issues, telehealth in the library, especially if people don't have computers at home. They can come to libraries and have a visit with their doctor. That happens a lot in rural areas. Libraries, we're continuing to see more libraries hire or get some support for social services with social workers. And then obviously having to have your presence, online. And where is that? Again, obviously Facebook was the place. Now it's moving for the younger generations to other platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, those are things that libraries are having to move into. Libraries continue to have more self-service options. So the technology through using your phone is continuing to move forward, and that's, I think, going to be a continued activity globally. Again, as I mentioned, the sustainable part of libraries. So libraries are being part of that with the climate change. The pandemic has highlighted that, and obviously people watching news realize, okay, that it is definitely real. So a lot of things that libraries are doing is they're creating spaces. They have grounds, so they're creating gardens in their library space and then using that for teaching and programming. And we're having those conversations. It's, how do we deal with social justice issues? How do we deal with the pandemic? So again, the library is an opportunity now to have some of those hard conversations. Academic libraries, again, had to shift and provide a lot of more resources and providing those for the faculty, for students. So a lot more web and media streaming, and again, like the challenge will be as far as how do you sustain that, as we move forward. So a lot of we know a lot of vendors provided reduced fee rates for that. So the question is, what will happen as we move forward? So that is a kind of a discussion still needing to be happened, and we'll have to see. Academic libraries did use the pandemic to create more virtual programming as well with their resources, trying to engage students as best they could with different things like contests. And a lot more collaborations going on between libraries and other units within units. We're seeing things that wouldn't have happened, or maybe were on the drawing board, through necessity. It's happening now, which is great to see. And libraries, public, academic, and schools are actually having more partnerships to kind of manage resources. And as I see here, again, here's an example of the University of Colorado has put a lot of their resources available through the Digital Public Library of America. So again, helping to get those collections that are kind of hidden in a university more available to the public. School libraries, if we have any school librarians on the call today, God bless you for all the work that you guys have done during the pandemic, having to work with faculty and teachers and students. So much has been asked of you. Again, looking at our surveys, so much more work has been done. If we're looking at doing more, you look at all those with the circles, how many times you're doing more on all these things that have been happening. So obviously had to do a lot of creating tutorials for teachers who didn't know how to use certain programs that the library had, or to help them with instruction. And also, again, how do we help students? So there's been training for mental health. So I think that's another area that's going to continue. ALA has been fortunate that with the pandemic, we've been able to advocate for good resources for libraries to help with budgets. So we will continue to do that. Again, how do conferences, what's the future of conferences? As we were talking with Rania before, AL's annual conference this year was virtual, just like IFLA and all these others at the moment, but obviously we're moving more toward in-person, but there will be a hybrid, so people who can't make it in person to that location can still participate in the conference. And just as Rania mentioned, for those of you who are on the call, if you can make it in person, or if you can make it virtually, the 8th Sharjah International Conference will be held 9, 10, and 11th, and so that's information there. And also, as we're talking about innovators, ALA does has a presidential citation for innovative international library projects every year, and so that contest, usually the deadlines are in January. So again, we'd love to hear all the great innovative activities that you're doing, and please consider applying for that. And with that, I want to thank you for your time, and happy to answer questions. Shukran.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. It was really very useful presentation. I've already many questions in mind that I was thinking about, but actually you covered all the areas that I was thinking about. And I was thinking about actually more things to discuss. One of them is the conferences, and you mentioned this by the end of your presentations. So I have one question. Do you think that after this crisis with the pandemic and the effect of this pandemic on the libraries, on the financial also resources, that we will think about having not all the conferences to be on person? It would be virtual more. This would decrease the preparations, and of course all the amount of money that many people are not able to attend, or they think about the cost, and libraries would send nominees and everything. So do you think that the virtual conferences would be the trend?
As you said, that's a very good question. And I think hopefully, I think the future is more the hybrid. So I think there may be some conferences that may not happen quite as frequently as they did before, or they may have, as you said, a kind of a virtual one in between, maybe some of the smaller conferences. But obviously, there is a desire for people, I think, who will want to meet again. and as we can tell, for us to get together and talk face to face and everything that is still important, all the networking, which is can happen virtually, but there's a lot of stuff that is not happening. The challenge is for associations like ourselves is, and just like IFLA, is the question of, usually conferences with exhibitors, et cetera, they help to provide resources for us to continue all the good work that we do. So I think we're going to have in-persons programming, but again, there will be some modifications where some things will be, there'll be some more just plain virtual conferences, but there will then also be that'll supplement a lot of the in-person events that again may not happen quite as frequently. But again, yeah, the question is now with the resources. I know because of the pandemic, librarians, their budget cuts for professional development have happened, so that it will take a while to kind of get back together. But it'll be interesting to see as we move forward, the interest in continuing to kind of always be at virtual. I think, hopefully people, at least especially for their opportunities to go to an international conference, or certainly, to go to a local conference, that they still have that chance, whether they can do it that one year or they can do it every other year.
Yes, I thank you for your answer. My second question actually about the different categories of patrons that were really interested to join the library during the pandemic. I can see that we invited new patrons, especially the elders, via the technology, of course. Not many of them were that interested, or they were not that able to visit the library. So I think by that, you mentioned the isolation. Do you think that this new categories would continue after the pandemic finished, or we return to our normal life?
I think that's where libraries need to strategize how to continue those connections. Again, if things open up and, the question is, do you not have phone calls to the people? Do you create, a monthly opportunity for them to connect to the library? But again, I think it's as you said, outreach in different ways will some of them will stay, again, as you said, because we have these new pockets of users and we don't want to lose them. So again, how do we can maintain those services with the budget issues that we have? There are challenges, again, of all these new digital resources that were provided that people took advantage of, and now the cost is going back up again for those. So there are some libraries that had streaming services, and now they're having to make a hard decision. Well, we can't afford that. Maybe we have some new users, but it just doesn't make economic sense for the number of people using it to continue those services. So how those are some of the challenges. But I think, as you said, once you get customers, just like in a business, you don't want to lose them.
Yeah, of course, you want more.
Right.
Yes, and actually, I was really so interested about the being interested about the mental health. You mentioned this and how to maintain the mental health of the teens, and how librarians are trained to do this during the pandemic. And of course, not only the pandemic, we need as librarians to be trained to deal with all mental health issues. And you mentioned also the anxiety and the stress that people faced during the pandemic. This also is a very new rule for the library to face. We didn't face such a pandemic in the present that lasted all this time. So we could not expect what comes after this. All of us were in the same situation. We can't expect what's next. We don't know about the future. We're all waiting for the vaccine. So as librarians, we should be more aware of how to deal with people when they face this, and when they come to us, even via the phone, or because of course the libraries were closed. So they tried to reach us by emails. Are you gonna open? How can you serve us? This is a sort of anxiety and stress. They want to do anything just to get rid of all the stress that they have. So I think this is a new rule for us as librarians. And when you mention this, it comes to my mind how it differs that we were all in the same situations, but we have not to be like the others. We have to act more and to make full use of this situation for the future, to train the librarians how to face pandemics. So what do you think about this? That we should have like workshops or something, even to the theme in the conferences, how or what we need to deal with people with anxiety and stress who come to the library with questions or with the stress or with the situation, and you're facing this situation after returning back to our normal life.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, during the pandemic, obviously has been hard on everyone, harder on some than others. And, you know, as you said, the staff themselves having to manage the situation, just like other business people having to do it. So, but as you said, for libraries, it's something that will continue on, I think. And it's just a heightened awareness and a need, as you said, for training to understand, you know, a lot of public libraries, as you know, or, you know, you have people who may already have some, you know, some mental health issues. You know that some of them come in, but now you have so many more who have almost what is considered post-traumatic stress disorder from the pandemic. And especially for students, you know, for the high schools and university students, even in the elementary schools, you know, how to make sure those awareness, so that the librarians really need to be paying attention to that. You know, and again, if you see some people with what can you do, or what can you do to connect them with other social services, a counselor, et cetera, because again, we know that that can become very critical and dangerous for people if they don't get help.
Okay, we will have questions from the chat from Sahar Gamal. She's asking about, does it apply to library member only, or are these services open for people, particularly overseas? She's asking about providing services virtually.
Yeah, so I think that's the advantage, is that now we are kind of a global library community, and most libraries are open to serving. Yeah, it's a good question, because you know, say if you came in to a library and you were from outside in a different town, you might not be able to check out a book or something, but now you are in some cases able to certainly take advantage of webinars and other programming that other libraries have virtually. There are restrictions on e-resources. You know, usually there are restrictions to the library is paying for their own customer base to have access. So some things, you know, if the library has to pay for those services, there usually is a wall again as to who has access to those. But again, with partnerships, it is expanding that. So as I mentioned, the partnerships between academic libraries, public, and schools, they're using kind of their resources to help expand. So say resources that are at the university, now high school students can use those.
Okay, thank you. The other question from Marwa Saif. She said, you mentioned book clubs and making hidden treasures of the university libraries accessible to students. Did you face any copyright issues? How libraries in the USA handled this?
Yes, so that you said that's a big question as we went into the pandemic, and how you could provide resources that could have copyright issues. Certainly for the story times that were happening, again, libraries were seeking permission from the publishers to more or less do their book talks virtually, and for the most part they got permission to do that. But again, you want to be aware of that. For the book clubs themselves that were using the virtual ones, it was a matter of how many licenses the library had to that book. So say a book club had 5 members and they all wanted to read that same book. So if the library had electronic rights to 5 books or more, the book club could just have that access, you know. But for the universities, obviously, as you said, most of the materials they have that they were putting on, say, the Digital Public Library of America, those are ones that have already kind of been vetted. for copyright issues, you know, so they have things that in their own collections that are usually unique materials kind of that they're putting on there. But again, it's a very good question that you always have to be concerned about that and double check and make sure that you've kind of done the research before allowing access.
Actually, I have a comment about this. This is a very good question because copyright issues and how to get involved more with the publishers and with the providers. This emerged when we faced this pandemic, actually, because we discovered that some libraries, you can't have access outside the library. And people were really in a mess because they couldn't reach the library and they couldn't continue the research because many students have already suspended the library and suspended from the universities, and they are isolated. And so, and you can't get online with all the online resources because you can't go to the library. So with all these copyright issues and all the access issues also of the free access and how providers could give us even free space in the pandemic period. Some providers actually did this. They enabled people to have more articles seen and to be free, which is good movement. But again, we will back to our normal life and everything has its cost. So I think this issue needs to be studied and to be considered.
Yes, as you said, I think those discussions that were already kind of happening, and ALA has been involved with the publishers and IFLA, and again, so everybody with your associations in your own countries to be having people working on that, because as you mentioned, Rania, that you know, people quickly discovered that their license said, oh, you have to be in the library to look at something, right? Yeah. Okay,
I'll give the chance to people if they are interested to ask questions by themselves. So if anyone is interested, just raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. Okay, let's see if we have a question in the chat. Okay, no. Okay. We're waiting if anyone has a question. Okay. There's no questions. I can give them like 1 minute for questions for anyone to write in the chat or to raise hands. So I can ask questions if no one is asking. So till someone is taking the place to or taking his time to send us his question or to raise hand. I would ask about the cost of technology, how increased it is. Because we can see that people are running after technologies, and with also this situation, we find that people are trying to get the better tools and better sets of technology pieces, like better mobiles, better laptops, and all this costs a lot. And I think that this also would continue after this pandemic, because people would always like to be in the comfort zone with all these technologies, the best ones at hand, and they can reach everyone via this tool. So they wanted to get the best. What do you think about this? Like, it's a case that you find everyone is searching and looking for the best. They are paying money for this.
Yeah, as you said, everybody
lots of money
has...
actually, that you can see that people are trying to look for the best technology, even if they can't afford it. They would prefer to get the best mobile and the best laptop just to feel secured with his data and with reaching out, because we're working at home for many hours and you are not going to your place, and people are expecting that this could happen anytime now. So they are running after technologies and best systems You can see that subscriptions for Zooms and WebEx and Teams, it's like higher, and institutions are paying for this. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, again, it's as you said, it's an issue where libraries, especially in the United States, really had to pivot on where they were putting their budget resources. So libraries, with the libraries' physical locations closed, they pretty much stopped, buying or reduced a lot of their print collections and put a lot more money toward those technological resources and adding new ones. And as you said, the challenges, those have high costs in many cases. And so how do you, once you create a resource for people, how do you maintain it? And again, as I said, how do you upgrade it as it happens? And so I think that's where we're going to be looking at more the consortium models that are happening. Again, having either a university consortiums or public library consortiums or states or provinces, helping to cover that. So we have a case in, say, our state libraries in the United States sometimes make purchases for all types of libraries in their state to certain resources. And so I think that's kind of what we'll have to do, is to be looking more at for all those things. So right now, as you said, a specific library might have bought Teams, access to Teams or Zoom licenses, or again, maybe it's a group of libraries may have to come together and kind of have negotiating power to expand, to talk to Zoom and say, we'll get more licenses, but you give us a reduced cost so we can expand.
Okay, we have more questions. Question from Dalia Yosri. She's asking, I would like to ask, how do your libraries fight back against the misinformation and disinformation infodemic during COVID?
Yeah, I think that's where, again, the library's communication channels have to be important, and working with, as you said, reputable partners, if the government is being reputable to provide information, to help get that information out. So again, you have people coming to the library, or you're sending them hopefully more email messages, more communication to your customers. And in those messages, you always want to start putting in more valid information to say, regarding the pandemic, what is the most up-to-date factual information, so that people are seeing that. And again, because libraries are reputable institutions, so we do have that trust. So we need to take advantage of that trust, is to use that to help combat as much information. The challenge is obviously is that happens out in the virtual sphere, which we don't have control over all of it. But as long as the library puts more emphasis on providing factual information, I think that is important. Obviously, the teaching the lessons, the information literacy, media literacy, those are things that are maybe not able to bear fruit right now. But again, we need to continue to do that, because misinformation, as we know, is not going away. So we need to have from kindergarten all the way to universities, to continuing on, to keep promoting, that there is a fake news out there, and what is the problem of that, and how do you detect it? Because certainly in the United States, we are struggling so much in this pandemic because of so much misinformation. How many people we were in, so many people who kind of understood the science and everything got vaccines, but then, there were so many people who didn't agree, or, said, oh, we're told that they didn't need it, or other things. And of course, now you have a new variant that comes in, and we're unfortunately, because of the misinformation, we are not in as good shape to handle that. So it is critical that libraries continue that role.
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with you, especially for the effect of disinformation and fake news on the number of people who registered for the vaccines. Actually, we didn't see much people interested in the vaccine in the start, because they were really follow the fake news that it's harmful, it's dangerous, no, don't take it. And I recommend what you mentioned in your presentations, that libraries are now tracking and trying to collect all the data about the pandemic and the virus and all the measures that happened in this time since it started in March 2019, or sorry, 2020 till now. So all the data related, even the fake news, what was the records itself, the number of casualties, everything. So I think this would be the resource where people would go to the library to know all about and even the new generation, if they wanted to know about this and how we faced this pandemic after like 20 years. It's archived and everything is there with all the fake news that was spreading and the actual numbers and everything. So actually, I recommend that libraries could adapt this project and try to spread it. So we have another question. You have mentioned the role of the library in creating a sustainable society like Bibliotheca Alexandrina. So how did American libraries help in the field of education?
Education related to sustainability. I think that is, again, something that libraries, all types of libraries, are really starting to focus a lot more on. If you probably looked, say, 5 years ago, there probably wasn't a ton of programming in libraries on, sustainable issues. But now, kind of this pandemic has really, and the climate change, I think the realization after the last couple years of so many catastrophes happening, mainly natural catastrophes, wildfires, hurricanes, etc., that the libraries realize that it is important that they start talking about this, and they also start showing the community how they are being sustainable. Again, the challenge is the misinformation, as we mentioned before. There's a lot of misinformation in there about climate change, and so the libraries again have a role working with their communities, NGOs or the government, again, to help promote programs that teach or educate people on sustainable practices.
I'm trying to read more questions, but it's written in Arabic, so I'm trying to translate.
Sure.
So
sure.
someone
Thank you.
is asking,
for
the services that's happening now, is it gonna continue after returning to normal life? So the services are gonna continue?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of, I think, as I said, mentioned certain services, I think, related to social justice and those things like getting more hot spots for people to check out. I mean, in the United States, we still have a lot of people who don't have good access, as you mentioned, to either the technology or to pay for a subscription to good Wi-Fi. And so that is going to continue for a while. So I think we're going to see that. I think as far as the virtual program, obviously when we turn more to normal, there'll be less kind of virtual programming, but there's still an opportunity there to reach people, these new customers who may not come as often to the library, to create programs that extend beyond our physical space. So, again, if you have a program at the Bibliotheca Alexandrina and you only can get 400 people in that room, the city of Alexandrina and Egypt itself is much larger, so you could have, if you videotape it or whatever, you're going to have more people.
Okay, the other question about the disinfection of the computers and all the library tools after returning to the library. So how the situation would be after returning to normal life and using all disinfectant and everything? What do you think about this? What will happen?
Yeah, I think that there's an awareness, again, when, I don't know in Egypt or other places around the world, but with everybody wearing masks, last year there was not a lot of flu in the United States. Usually every year there's a lot of flu. And because people were wearing masks and staying home, that was decreased quite a bit. So I think the realization that better sanitation in all cases, whether you wash your hands or more often, and so for libraries, I think it is also just a good health practice is to, wipe down your computers more often. clean them more often than you did. In the old days, probably you maybe cleaned them once a month. Now maybe they're going to clean them twice a day or every day or something. Those kind of best practices, I think some of that will continue. It may not be as stringent if there's not a pandemic, but again, I think just overall for understanding that viruses are out there no matter what they are, and it's better if libraries are taking more precautions.
I think this would be a lifestyle that we will go with for the future and for every situation that we are in a place with many people. We have to take care of everything, wash your hand and follow the instructions. We have a question from Tagreed, and she is raising her hand, so we will give her the chance to talk. Okay. Mute her. Okay. 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 Tagreed. Okay. Tagreed. Tagreed, you want to ask a question? Okay. I don't know. Where is she? Okay, we have another question. So we'll be waiting for Tagreed if she returned back. But we have another question. Do you design educational training for general public to let them know how to deal with the crisis? Crisis management at the pandemic is sort of crisis?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as just general crisis management for the public, libraries have been doing things like disaster management. How to they bring in officials again if you're in a location where there's hurricanes or fires or something. They sometimes have programming for that. As far as I haven't been aware that there's been a lot of kind of the crisis management for the pandemic. I think again, it's really it's the health crisis. The mental health is really that crisis. So as far as I would say, that's what most libraries are doing some programming about. Again, how to manage stress, how to manage anxiety, because that's I guess that's a crisis that I think the libraries are focusing on right now. As far as there are other crises, and now we're going to have some, we have changes in some of our laws where people who have not had to pay rent for a while might be evicted. So again, there may be some programming related to that. So it depends on what kind of the crisis is for certain populations.
Okay. Okay, sorry. We will. Thank you, Mike. We will have another question. Actually, we're having more questions.
That's fine.
So yeah, and some questions are in Arabic, so I have also to translate it. This question is about the free access, the open access. So is it possible to use the available resources and references to different libraries in all over the world? What she means about is free access without charges or subscriptions that you have to pay in advance, especially in the time of the COVID, or is it only available regionally or locally? And if it's okay and there is a free access, what's the link? This is the question, if I received it. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much all that I showed were free links to ALA materials or other resources. So those are available. So you're able to use that. Again, obviously we work with our vendors. Vendors put a lot of investment into resources to make them available. So, again, it's what are the kind of fair pricing that people need to have access to resources. I think the pandemic, again, with budget issues, certainly the open access movement has continued to move forward at a better pace. Again, realization that again, hopefully allowing more access to resources, creating content, so that people who don't have to, who can't afford, say, a certain type of database, could get some similar information, good quality information elsewhere for free or through other reduced resources. So it's again, it's still a dance, I think, that we're trying to figure out as far as how that moves forward. Again, we want to, the economy, we need people to invest in things, but we also need to have fair access to resources. So yeah, not everything is free and open right now, and it probably won't be. But again, the libraries and ALA and IFLA and others continue to kind of promote to make sure as much as possible that libraries are able to provide as much accessibility as they can and needed information to their communities.
Yes, totally agree with you. This is the topic that we have to trigger. The same person is asking another question. Is there a protocol that we could follow? And you have followed this protocol before in the American libraries and succeeded. So is there any protocol that they could follow?
And a protocol related to what?
Information and fair access.
Oh, well, ALA, if you would go to the ALA website, there's a lot of good resources explaining that. And again, because we're in the United States, we have to work on that from a US perspective. Again, each country has different rules and different laws. So I think it's looking more at this area. So if you're interested in it, again, look for videos or resources that are available. If you type in open access and American Library Association, we have a lot of good resources that explain that, but there are also things on IFLA. So I would suggest that you look at that.
Actually, I'm looking at different places. So I'm trying to follow the chat, and we are receiving more questions in the on our Facebook page, because people are trying to send questions in different places. That's why I was looking, because I don't want to miss anyone. So no, okay. So anyone is interested to ask a question? Another one? Okay. You have a question? Okay, we don't have more questions. Actually, you covered all that anyone could think about it. I myself had many questions in mind, and you tried to cover all, and I know how hard it is to think about different topics in different areas, and to try to talk about the whole situations, and not only in the public libraries, but also in academic and also school libraries. And I know how it was difficult for the academic libraries, actually, and the school libraries to survive during the pandemic. Maybe the public libraries were more lucky because we have our patrons back, but the academics, still the university is not fully working. So I think they would be somehow delayed, and also the schools. But the public libraries were the first actually to open and to reopen again. So we're lucky. So just waiting if anyone is sending anything. So no, we don't have. You have. There's one question in the chat. Okay, yes. Another question from Marwa Saif. You highlighted the role of mental health. How librarians manage this?
I guess, is that related to librarians themselves, or is that more toward helping others? I guess that's kind of which part of that question.
Okay.
But certainly I think libraries, for the most part in the United States, again, quickly understood the challenges of mental health for their staff, and in most cases tried to be communicative. I know a lot of libraries, probably just like in other places, they started weekly or almost daily Zoom calls. Again, they were having to keep people updated on changes because things were changing so quickly with the rules and everything, but also a lot of check-ins. So I think people were doing a lot more check-ins, and I think that the challenge is now that we're farther down the road is that libraries and managers still need to do that and not forget that, because again, especially in the United States, we thought, oh, we are almost getting to the end of the pandemic, and of course now we're in a new crisis, and so the extension, libraries may close again, if the cases rise too much in a. So again, the staff will be going back to kind of their older roles. At least it's something they have been through once before, so it won't be quite as dramatic, but again, just the mental, to try to go through this pandemic marathon is very difficult. So I think as far as staff, make sure you reach out to your staff if you're managers, again, communicate and try to help people. And again, whether it's, you guys, set up a weekly, a daily yoga time for people, or a dance thing or something that helps people, or to people to kind of just share, what is stressing them. I think it's, obviously you have your close friends at your staff or your in your library, but maybe as a whole group, there needs to be a little more opportunity for that, so that especially those staff who you may see as being more isolated, not as connected to everybody else, just like in the regular public.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I think so. This issue also is very booming now, because everyone is thinking, because we ourselves need some trainings on this, because we are thinking now we are serving from the library, but maybe the next month we'll be at home again. So we have to be prepared. And now we are trained on this. Now we know how to deal with this. We have our BCs, we have our drinks to share our friends via Zoom. So yes, we can do it. And most probably people now tried or to figure their own place at homes, to figure how to isolate themselves in a very peaceful place, comfy zone. So you work in a peaceful, and you are not going to bother yourself to dress again and to go to your library. So you have to look at the bright side of being at home. Thank you, Michael. We don't have more questions. I was so happy actually to have you today, and it was a really great presentation and very useful and very informative. And I was so happy actually to receive more questions from people who are interested and still interested how to figure out more ways to connect to their patrons, and how to have more ways to develop themselves and to promote their work in the pandemic and after we return back to our normal life. And I hope to return back soon and to travel again.
Yes.
So I have to thank you again and say we need to meet, and of course this Zoom meetings and this virtual meetings is not actually a substitute for meeting each other, and the face-to-face meetings is still the best for all of us, and we miss this connection with each other, but hopefully we will return back. And best of luck in your coming conference. And I know that it's gonna be one of the best, what you did in the last conferences in Sharjah. You made footprint actually in this place. And thank you for what you did actually.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rania, and again, thank you for letting me be part of this Bibliotheca Alexandrina series. It's really great to have an opportunity to share some things with so many colleagues in different parts of the world, and certainly in the MENA region. So again, I hope everybody stays well, stays safe. Again, yeah, take care of yourself, take care of your families. Take breaks if you need to, but again, we are all doing important work, and so just to be mindful of that as we kind of do our service.
Thank you. I have just a few words in the closing, just to confirm that this program is conducted through BAIFA's and Réseau Francophone's Facebook pages, and within its framework. We are organizing a number of virtual activities and events, including sharing wide range of valuable resources, including e-articles, videos, and databases, and organizing a number of webinars that will be given by experts. The current sub-theme we are tackling is library information science and IT in the time of COVID crisis, and the upcoming sub-theme will be education during COVID crisis. Follow us and stay tuned. Thank you everyone for your patience, and thank you for your time. Bye. See you soon.
Yep, see you soon.
See you.